Some marriages begin with a theft. There is an old story told along the Western Isles of Scotland in the small stone cottages that face the sea. It is the story of a fisherman and of the woman he chose for a wife, and of what she had left at the edge of the water on the night he first saw her. It is a story that does not end the way most love stories end. But the people who tell it say that, even so, it is a love story. And tonight you will hear why. His name was Donald, and he lived alone in a small stone cottage on the shore of one of the Outer Islands. He was not young, and he was not old, but he had begun to know that a man without a wife at his hearth grows quieter than is good for him. One summer evening, walking the strand at low tide to gather driftwood, Donald saw something he could not quite believe. On the flat rocks at the far end of the bay, where the seals usually came to bask, there were no seals. There were women. 7 of them. They were dancing in a slow, swaying circle, and they were laughing in a language he had never heard. He crept closer through the dune grass, hardly breathing, and he saw, folded on the rocks behind them, 7 dark skins, soft, glistening, spotted like seals. He understood then what he was looking at. They were Selkies, seal women who could put aside their skins and walk in the bodies of women on land. The nearest skin, the smallest one, was within reach of his hand. So Donald reached out and he took it, and he hid it inside his coat, and he carried it back across the dunes in silence. He climbed the path to his cottage as fast as his legs would carry him. He climbed up onto a stool inside the cottage, and he pushed the folded skin deep into the rafters, behind the smoked herring and the loops of rope where no one would ever look. And then he sat down by the cold hearth, and he waited. At the deepest part of the night, there was a small knock at his door. He opened it. The woman who stood there was not tall, but she was beautiful in a way Donald had never seen, with skin like wet stone, and hair like seaweed in the moonlight, and eyes that held the whole of the sea. She wore nothing. She was crying. "I have lost my skin," she said. "I cannot go home without it. Please, have you seen it on the strand?" Donald looked her in the eyes, and he lied. "I have not," he said. He gave her his old wool cloak. He took her in. He gave her bread and a place by the fire. And in the morning, when she said she had no name to give him and no village to go back to, he asked her quietly if she would stay. She stayed. It was strange at first. She did not know how to cook over a peat fire. She did not know how to spin wool, or how to milk the cow, or how to clean a fish for the smokehouse. But she learned. She learned all of it. She was quick and she was patient, and the small cottage grew warmer with her in it than it had been in many years. They were married before the first snow. The minister came up from the south end of the island, and the neighbors came with bread and dried fish for a feast, and the woman from the sea wore Donald's mother's blue dress, and she smiled at him across the table, and the smile reached her eyes. In the spring, their first son was born, a dark-haired boy with gray eyes too old for his small face. She held him to her chest and she laughed, the same low laugh Donald had first heard on the rocks. And Donald looked at his wife and his son, and he thought, surely, that he had everything a man could ever ask for. More children came. A daughter the year after, and a second son 2 years after that. 3 children, healthy and loud, learning to fish and to mend nets and to dance Scottish reels in the small kitchen on winter nights. Their mother loved them. There was no question of that. She would sit by the hearth at night, brushing their hair with long, slow strokes, telling them stories of seals that had once been kings and seas that had once been gardens, and a green country at the bottom of the water where the music never stopped. But every evening, after the supper dishes were dried and put away, she would walk down to the shore alone. She would stand at the edge of the water with her arms folded, and she would look out toward the open sea. Sometimes the seals would come close, very close, and they would lift their dark heads out of the waves, and they would look at her. And she would look at them, and neither would speak. Donald would watch her from the door of the cottage, and he would not call her back because he was afraid of what she might answer. Seven years went by, and then one more. It was a wet, gray morning in late autumn. The oldest boy, now almost 8, needed a longer fishing line for the small rod his father had made him. He knew his father kept old line coiled somewhere in the rafters of the cottage. He dragged a stool across the floor. He climbed up. There, behind the smoked herring and the loops of rope, was a folded bundle of something dark and soft. He pulled it down, curious. The cloth, or skin, was strange against his fingers. Cool and smooth and somehow still damp after all those years. He carried it to his mother where she stood at the hearth. "Mother," he said, "what is this beautiful thing?" She turned. She saw what was in his hands. And for a long moment she could not speak, and she could not breathe, and she could not move, and the boy thought his mother had gone to stone. Then she knelt. She took the skin from her son with both hands, very gently, and she pressed her face against it and she began to weep. She did not weep for long. She kissed her oldest son on the forehead. She found her daughter in the yard and kissed her too. She found her youngest son sleeping in his cot, and she kissed his small, warm cheek, and she stood looking at him for a long time. Then she walked down to the shore. Donald was in the kitchen garden when he understood. He understood from the silence in the cottage behind him, and from the way the gulls suddenly rose all at once over the bay. He dropped his spade. He began to run. He ran down the path he had once climbed with the stolen skin under his coat. He ran across the dune grass. He ran out onto the wet shingle of the strand. He was too late. There, just past the edge of the surf, was a single dark head, a single dark eye looking back at him. The shape of his wife, the shape of the woman he had loved for 8 years, and the mother of his 3 children already changing in the cold gray water. She did not call to him. She did not lift a hand. She turned and she dove, and she was gone. In the years that followed, the children grew. The oldest son became a fisherman like his father. The daughter married a man from the south end of the island. The youngest son went to sea on the merchant ships and saw cities his father could not have imagined. And every spring, when the 3 of them came home, and every summer and every long blue twilight in the autumn, they would walk down to the strand together, the way she had once walked alone. And every time, sooner or later, they would see her. A single dark head out beyond the surf. A single bright eye, watching. She would come close. She would not come out, but she would lift her head, and she would look at her children, the way she had looked at them long ago by the hearth. Quietly, patiently, with all the love a mother can carry and none of the words she had ever needed to speak. Some loves are kept, the people of those islands say, by holding. And some loves are kept by letting go. And both, in the end, are still love. This was Forgotten Fables. Follow the channel when you want the next story the loud world forgot.